Down judgment on the contempt of court case against former President Jacob Zuma later this morning. The chair of the State Capture Commission, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, had asked the Apex Court to declare Zuma in contempt of court. He also wanted him sentenced to 2 years in prison for defying summons to testify before the commission. Samkele Maseko is outside the Constitutional Court this morning. Samkele, earlier on there wasn't much happening outside the court. Is there any development now?
At this point in time, Desiree, there's not much activity outside the court. As I just step out of shot, that my colleague Tabiso Rakwana can just show you the entrance of the state capture of the Constitutional Court over the case that relates to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry that was brought by the Commission against former President Jacob Zuma for him essentially being in contempt of court by not appearing before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. In our arrival here, we did see a number of VIP protection services that normally protect presidents or former presidents. We do know that there is a scanner as well. When you enter the Constitutional Court, they did earlier on tell us that they are expecting a convoy to arrive here at the Constitutional Court as it hands down that particular judgment against former President Jacob Zuma on being in contempt of court. You remember that the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, through its senior counsel, Advocate Tamberangugai Toby, approached this court in the instruction of the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo to compel former President Zuma to appear before the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and not only just to appear, but also to not have a right to remain silent, but to answer all of the questions that are posed to the former president. He instead issued a letter through his attorneys, Eric Mabuza attorneys, that he would be taking no part in any litigation instituted against him by the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. That walkout at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry by the former president has essentially opened up a can of worms and the legal woes of him against the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Yesterday, I did see his foundation tweeting a picture of Lula da Silva, the former president of Brazil, who was also incarcerated, in saying that he may also be anticipating that he may be incarcerated for that harshest punitive measure that has been asked by the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which is 2 years or two for the former president to be slapped with a fine. But the Concord is essentially saying they are expecting a convoy to come here to the Constitutional Court when judgment is handed down, Desiree.
We know that only 20 people are allowed to go in, including media. Will the SABC be going in?
Will definitely be inside court. There is a pool feed that has been arranged for all three media broadcasters, 24-hour news channels in the country. But my colleague Tabiso Rakwana, if there is any activity outside court here, he will be anticipating and will be feeding any visuals if former President Zuma were to arrive here at the Constitutional Court. I'm not sure if he is able to just show you those pictures of 3 police officers who are currently huddling and having a discussion there. There are about 10 other police officers who are currently inside court. I have seen about 6 police vehicles here at the Constitutional Court, around the court, and in case there should be any protest that comes to the Constitutional Court, even though the political space in the country is closed, but the Constitutional Court is not leaving anything for chance, and they are prepared for anything, particularly knowing that former President Zuma has been very vocal when it comes to the issues of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. You'd remember that before Chief Justice Mogoeng took his long leave of absence, he did ask in an unprecedented manner for the former president to write to him and to say what type of punitive measure the Constitutional Court should confer against him for being in contempt of court. Many legal analysts, many legal practitioners questioned the stance by the Chief Justice Mogoeng in asking for someone to basically say what kind of sentence should they be given in an unprecedented manner. Some people questioned if, for instance, Samkele Maseko were to be in trouble with the law and with the Constitutional Court. I would also expect to be offered that courtesy of telling the Constitutional Court what kind of punitive measure I should be given for being against the Constitutional Court or being in trouble with the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. But former President Zuma is essentially saying that he is prepared to become the first prisoner of this Constitutional Court, fighting for his Bill of Rights. This case essentially began when the former President Jacob Zuma asked the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, the chairperson of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, to recuse himself in the testimony that the former president would be giving to the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, as former President Zuma alleged that the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is conflicted on this particular issue, as him and the Deputy Chief, and as Zuma and the Deputy Chief Justice have a long-standing relationship. They are family friends, they are friends. The Deputy Chief Justice has also been to the private residence of the former president. They also have family relations in the form that former President Zuma's estranged wife, Thobeka Madiba Zuma, a sister, has also a daughter or a child with the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, and Zondo coming out and basically saying that he's no friend with the former president. They did have a relationship during the early 80s, going up to the early 1990s, but essentially looks like none of these two particular gentlemen was willing to back down, which essentially saw former President Zuma snubbing the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, where today this particular apex court in the Republic of South Africa will essentially lay down the law of whether former President Jacob Zuma will be wearing orange overalls or he will not, or either he will be given a punitive measure of 2 years incarceration, or he will be fined a fine by the Constitutional Court. But the State Capture Commission of Inquiry is not mincing its words in saying they want the harshest punitive measure for the former president to be incarcerated for 2 years for being in contempt of court. Desiree.
Of course, we're counting down to 10 a.m. when that decision will be announced. Samkela Maseko, thank you so much for setting the scene for us. But looking ahead to that Constitutional Court decision, we're joined via Zoom by political analyst Ongama Mtinka. A very good morning to you, and thank you so much for making the time.
Good morning to you, Desiree, and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
It's clear to everyone that former President Jacob Zuma defied the State Capture Commission, but this is a very nuanced case. Is the outcome a foregone conclusion?
The outcome under normal circumstances should be a foregone conclusion. There was a constitutional order which came out of a process in which there was a determination that, in fact, President Zuma was compelled to go and appear before the Commission of Inquiry into state capture. And that ruled out any possibility from a constitutional rights perspective to have him elect not to go there. So this should be a clear case then. But what I suspect is an issue here is because obviously, well, not even suspect, but because this is a high-profile individual politically, and he has actively framed the process as fundamentally political, what we may find is a degree of carefulness from the Concord judges in terms of how they apply themselves to this matter. They know that they are going to be looked at with so much scrutiny, with the public looking at the extent to which their decision demonstrates independence of the judiciary and the preeminence of the rule of law, while the supporters of President Jacob Zuma are going to be looking at the extent to which the decision is not favorable to him. And whether or not that decision is rational is neither here nor there for them. All that matters is whether the decision is favoring him. And obviously, we know we can anticipate what the consequence will be should the decision not be in their favor.
I wanted to say that public you're referring to, how do you think, and I know it's an unfair question, but how do you think South Africans want to see this play out?
South Africans want to see that the constitutional integrity of the Republic is not allowed to be threatened by politicians. They want to see a constitutional court that will not be political in its approach, but will apply the rule of law in its interpretation in ways that see them take a decision that is not attempting to manage political risks, but rather applies itself passionately without any compassion to the rule of law to the extent possible. So what we may find is that the Constitutional Court might either act in tandem with that expectation, or they may take a strategic deferral of the decision by, for example, things like saying, once they interpreted the constitutionality and the need for President Jacob Zuma to appear, there was no longer any constitutional questions to the extent that this could have been taken to a lower court. I suspect that could be one of the options, but I'm not a legal fundi. I mean, if they want something that balances between the political content of the case with issues of rationality and the rule of law, they might just explore options such as, for example, as people have suggested, suspended sentences, or give Zuma yet another olive branch in terms of how he can make amends with what he has taken. But they will be under significant scrutiny for how they are treating this witness. And in fact, I doubt that they would want to play that game with them themselves having chastised Judge Zondo for having treated Zuma in a special way.
With all of those possible outcomes that you're referring to, you've said it yourself, there are legal and there are political implications. Is the court even considering the political side?
It ought not to. It's not their mandate to reduce decisions which they take on the basis of cases in front of them, bearing in mind political risks. Yes, indeed, what we've seen in research coming from the US since the 1990s was that among the spheres of government, there was an increasing focus in research on what actions get taken by one arm of the state in a way that suggests that they are taking those actions mindful of what the potential reaction could be at another level. So I'm saying they don't have much leeway to play in that space. And if they do so, they will actually need to find legal grounds for whatever decision they're going to take, as opposed to political risk considerations.
In the final analysis, the former president has made it clear that he will not appear at the Zondo commission. Will the outcome sway him, possibly or not? Will we ever see him appear at the commission, or will he opt, as he said in that letter of his, for jail?
What's very evident in the messaging of the Jacob Zuma Foundation, as well as the former president himself, is that they have no hope that whatever he has to say is enough for him to emerge out of a process of testifying in a stronger position. So it is better then to actually explore the strategy they have been doing, which is the political posturing and reframing of the process as fundamentally political. And him being a power player, it serves him better to continue to play in the space by framing this as a political process and triggering responses along those lines, than to simply go and clear his name before the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture.
Of course, you and I will both be watching for that outcome as it comes out at 10 a.m. But I just want to take advantage of having you here now and just your perhaps tying it to this conversation, your take on the evidence of Zizi Kodwa at the commission yesterday.
had a busy day. I still have to catch up with that evidence.
Okay, taken.
Sorry to disappoint you there, Des.
Taken, but thank you so much, Ongama. Thank you so much for making the time to speak to us today, political analyst Ongama Mtinka, just as we look ahead to that Constitutional Court judgment that comes out at 10 a.m. this morning, where they will determine whether or not former President Jacob Zuma is in contempt of court and, of course, decide on the appropriate sanction.